This is Inside the BFA, the official podcast of the Balloon Federation of America. Each episode of Inside the BFA is an open discussion of the many aspects of the sport of ballooning and the BFA's work to represent its members and the ballooning community at large. Now, here's your host, editor of the BFA's Ballooning Journal, Glenn Moyer.
Good evening, everyone. Good morning to some of you. We'll explain in a moment. Welcome to another edition of Inside the BFA. Tonight, a very special group of folks are joining us, and I'm very privileged to be able to have the chance to speak with all three of them together, probably for the first time since they've completed their historic flight. We are going to be talking with the three pilots from the Atlantic Explorer 2026 flight, the recent historic transatlantic balloon flight under hydrogen. And we'll meet each of them in just a moment. This was, as many of you already know, a very historic flight in a number of ways. It is one of the longest distance transatlantic flights. Their landing flew well past that of the Double Eagle and Double Eagle II and other transatlantic flights. It was one of the fastest, I can't talk tonight, one of the fastest crossings of the Atlantic by balloon. It was the first transatlantic flight by a hydrogen gas balloon. You see the track on our screen now. It was not the only one, but it was one of a few rare open basket crossings of the Atlantic. And when all is said and done, it will set a world record for the distance for that size and type of balloon. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to have a lot of folks viewing. I'm sure there will be questions. You can pose questions if you're watching tonight, either on YouTube or Facebook. I will monitor those questions and try and get as many of them worked into the conversation as we can. We only have about an hour, so understand we will only touch the highlights of what an amazing flight this was. So bear with us on that. But thank you for joining us, and let's get on to our discussion and meet our guest tonight. First of all, I'm joined by Mr. Bert Padelt. Bert is a balloon designer and builder, and including three of his balloons that have won the prestigious Gordon Bennett long-distance balloon race. Also, the America's Challenge gas distance balloon race has been won 5 times in Padelt balloons. He's the owner of Best Aviation Services. He holds multiple world records himself, was inducted into the U.S. National Ballooning Hall of Fame in 2021. He was awarded the FAI CIA Montgolfier Diploma in 2012 for contributions to the sport of ballooning. He was awarded the BFA Schildtrager Award in 2015 for contributions to the science of ballooning. He was the systems director for many of Steve Fawcett's flights, including his Round the World flight in 2002. In 2007, he built the smallest manned gas balloon to cross the Atlantic, a mere 37,000 cubic feet, which was piloted by Sir David Hempleman Adams. And he is now the first and only balloonist to have ever crossed the Atlantic in a balloon built under or by his own hands. I could go on for hours, Bert, but we only have a limited amount of time, so I hope we hit the highlights. Peter Cuneo is joining us. He is best known by many of the BFA members, perhaps, as the longtime co-editor of the BFA Gas Division newsletter. He is a member of the board of directors of the Anderson Abruzzo Albuquerque International Balloon Museum Foundation. With his partner, Barbara Fricke, he has won the America's Challenge. They, I should say, have won the America's Challenge gas balloon race 4 times. He and Barbara have also competed in 10 Gordon Bennett races, winning both a 4th and 3rd place finish. And he was, interestingly enough, co-pilot with the late Julian Knott in a Bert Padelt-built tetrahedron smoke balloon for the filming of a Japanese documentary about Knott's famous flight that did show that balloons might have been used to help create the famous Nazca Plains line drawings. Finally, our great pleasure to welcome at a very late hour, just past midnight in the United Kingdom, Alicia Hempleman Adams. Alicia is an MBE. For those of you who don't know, that is a member of the British Empire. She was given that award by King Charles III in 2024. She was in the same year awarded the FAI CIA's Montgolfier Diploma. She holds multiple British and world ballooning and airship records, including just recently this past week certified by the FAI distance of over 29 kilometers for the BX-4 and the BX-04 and 05 hot air airships, and duration for the AX-03 hot air balloon at 5 hours and 34 minutes. And those records, ironically, were all set not in the UK, but right here in the USA in North Dakota. She is also, of course, the daughter of famous British adventurer and balloonist Sir David Templeman Adams, who I hope is watching tonight. Hello, sir. And is also now the first British woman to complete a transatlantic crossing by balloon, and the first to do so in a pure gas balloon. Welcome to you all. Thank you all for joining us. For Alicia, this is going to be a very long and short night, as it's after the midnight hour there. And as she was just telling us off screen that she has to be at work at 6:30 in the morning. So a very long and short night for her. Thank you again so much for joining us. We're going to try to hit the highlights. We're going to go chronologically, sort of from launch to landing. That seems to make the most sense. So, Bert, I'm going to start with you. All of us have heard and read about how this flight was a dream come true for you. It was a dream you've held since childhood. Tell us, when and how did that dream first enter into your life? The idea that you would one day be carried away on a balloon, and how did it come to play in this?
So the dream came to me when I was probably 10 years old. I was very fascinated with ballooning already, and I was night fishing with my dad on a boat in 1973, and he, in conversation, said there's a balloonist that's getting ready to fly across the Atlantic Ocean from Bar Harbor, Maine. This was Bob Sparks' attempt in 1973, and it fascinated me. And the rest of the night, all I thought about was, one, I thought that would have been done by now, and two, wouldn't it be cool if I was the first to do it? And that's where the dream started.
Awesome. As I said, we're going to have to try to touch principally a lot of highlights tonight. You made 2 attempts at this journey. And I know that after the second one, especially with the suspected gas leak, there was a lot of consternation on your part about would you commit to doing a third one. How difficult was that decision? And when did you come to the decision that, yes, you were going to try one more time?
The decision to do it again, Glenn, wasn't as difficult as the failure. The failure was extremely difficult. Probably the most depressed I've ever been in my life. And I don't know if anyone can really imagine what it was and what I went through with that. But the decision to go again was pretty easy because we had all of the equipment. All of the equipment came back. There was nothing that was damaged from an equipment standpoint. Mm-hmm. I know how to do it, so that wasn't a problem. And so when Peter called and said, "Hey, let's give this another try," it didn't take a lot of thought. I had to clear it with Joni, my wife, but Joni has always been extremely supportive of everything that I've done. And
so, I'm sorry, so we owe all this to Peter?
On the second attempt, Joni said, "We're doing it because we already have a balloon. If we have to build a balloon again, I'm not sure about doing it again." Well, we had to build another balloon or rebuild the balloon that we had. And but she stood behind me on that 100%.
Well, God bless Joni for that. So, Peter, we owe this successful flight then to your inspiration, your decision to go forward?
I would say gentle coaxing was more along the lines. I don't think Bert took a whole lot of push, but I certainly supported Joni. Both Joni and I thought that it was a good thing to do it one more time, and that third time would be lucky, and that's what it proved to be.
Awesome. Alicia, those of us who watched the live feed, and I know there were countless numbers of folks who were watching the live feed the night of the launch. we were able to see Bert going through the rather lengthy pre-flight checklist, but I'm curious, how did you and Peter occupy yourselves? What were your duties, responsibilities? How did you pass the time waiting for all of that to get done before you could finally take off?
So on this occasion, whilst we were waiting for sort of the wind to die down, whilst it was really gusting, actually me and Joni sat in the car talking for quite a while, just because there was no way that with it gusting like that there was going to be possible to do anything, even to go through the checklist. So we spent quite a lot of the time in the car sort of chatting, and then as soon as we could kind of see that there started to be sort of dips in the wind, we all went and sort of sat in the basket, so that, you know, in between the lulls, that we could kind of go through the checklist and make sure everything was ready to go if there was an opportunity to do it.
And Fred, I think you can bring up some of the pictures that we have of the launch. This is an interesting picture because there are a bunch of people crowded around the basket. Some of those are launch crew, I'm sure. Most of them, I would assume. How busy was the pre-flight portion of the launch that evening? And I didn't address that to anyone in particular, so
I can jump in on that if you want.
Okay, go right ahead, Peter. Thank you.
The pilots were supposed to be sleeping and coming back at 6 o'clock with the balloon completely inflated. Due to the heavy winds we were having, when I came back at 6 o'clock, the balloon was still laying on the ground. So I was there, and I think Bert and Alicia were there for most of the actual inflation. So we didn't get quite as much sleep as we might have. But the pre-inflation involves a lot of arranging of sandbags, getting the hydrogen flowing to the point where you can actually stand the balloon up, getting the balloon weighed off. And that was all very tricky because the winds were creating false lift, and getting the balloon weighed off correctly was very difficult under the wind conditions. It was very fortuitous that there were two 15-minute periods when the wind was calm, separated by about 2 hours. And in the first one, we got the balloon weighed off. And in the second 15-minute one at 2 o'clock in the morning, we actually launched the balloon towards a tree line, but in a calm enough wind condition that we were able to go over the tree line. And as we radioed back to the people on the ground, they said within 5 minutes, the winds picked up again. So these two, I'd say 15-minute periods of calm separated by about 4 hours were just very fortuitous and allowed us to get the balloon in the air.
I remember watching, that's a great shot there as the balloon disappears into the starry night sky. I remember watching the live feed and being amazed. Dawn Honey, who was doing a bit of the live feed, was talking about how the load tapes were literally vibrating and singing almost in the wind. That was quite interesting. Bert, I wanted to touch very briefly on probably the most unsung member of your team, and his role was there at the launch. And that's the landowner, Paul Sear, who not only supported this flight, but supported your two previous attempts. You were able to store all of your equipment in his place, and he allowed all of these people onto his land to help this flight be accomplished. And again, not just this one time, but the two previous flights. How critical was support from a landowner like him to your efforts?
We couldn't have done it without Paul Sear. As simple as that. I had been asked a number of times after I had met Paul why one of the questions that would often come up is, why has it taken you so long to fly across the Atlantic? And or to attempt the Atlantic. And my answer always was because I had not met Paul Sear yet. Paul has become a extremely good friend. He's very supportive to the ballooning community. He has a beautiful piece of property, and he loves to share his property with people. He has a heart of gold. He's a very special person. And this flight would not have been possible for a lot of people were it not for a lot of people. But Paul is one of the people that really made this flight possible.
And there were actually 4 years.
Sorry, go ahead.
He actually provided support for 4 years, because there was a year, 2023, when Bert was up there, but never got in the air. So this is even a little bit longer running than is well known.
Thank you for that. He was also very supportive and generous with his photography to me and the BFA magazine, which is also deeply appreciated. I just thought that's really remarkable for a landowner to be that supportive, who didn't have a truly vested interest per se in the flight. And I thought we should mention that as a thank you to him for that. So we've launched. You're in the air now, and this is the part of the flight where, to my reckoning, a lot of people call it the shakedown cruise part of the flight, because you launch inland. No, we're not to that yet, Fred. That's life on board. We'll get there in a moment. We're still on the launch part. But you're in the air, and those first few hours is when you're shaking down the balloon to make sure everything's working properly, and you have to make the decision whether to continue over the ocean, or if there is a problem, you're over land so you can still abort and land safely. This was where on the first 2 attempts the problems arose. How that has to be a tense time at any time on a flight like this, but was it more stressful on this flight because it was the 3rd time, because this was where the problems had occurred before? Was there an extra amount of tension going on, or were things working so well that everyone was celebratory?
The apprehension for me was before we took off, because I did not want this flight to fail, and especially after the last year. And we made great efforts to put this balloon back together, so that we would not have any problems. And I remember having a dream that we were in the air and the balloon wouldn't come down. And I remember looking at Alicia in my dream and saying, "See, this is the way it's supposed to fly." And we were in the air probably no more than 30 minutes. And I turned around with a big grin on my face, and I said to Alicia, "See, this is the way the balloon is supposed to fly." So all apprehensions were gone for me after 30 minutes in the air.
Alicia, you were finally on your way. This was your 2nd time, obviously. You experienced the first failure. What about you? Any different tension or apprehension at that point in the flight?
No, I think also for me, once we sort of got off the ground, because it was so windy, it was definitely, we had sat and waited for so long that night. And we were sort of creeping towards that sort of cutoff where the weather guys were saying, if you're not off the ground by this time, we're going to struggle. So we were really creeping towards that time. And so getting that sort of lull and being able to get off the ground really was sort of where all the apprehension was. Once we were in the air and we were flying, and it was flying well, it definitely dissipated, but it definitely the balloon gave us a run for its money. So
Peter, Mike and Deborah Scholes, who you may know from over in the UK, they're waiting to hopefully make their 2nd attempt at their own transatlantic flight. They emailed me and said they noticed a substantial gain in altitude as you were crossing over Nova Scotia, and they wanted to know if that was due to thermal activity or some other reason.
No, I don't feel that we had any thermal activity. We were generally having an increased altitude profile just because that's the way the balloon wants to fly. It was, that was a decision point for us, because that was our last chance to land before we went out over the real ocean. And there was a period right before that when it seemed like the balloon was using a lot of ballast coming into sunset, and we were wanting to maintain altitude. Our meteorologist had told us that we wanted to stay above 10,000 feet at that point. I don't feel that that was our highest point by any means. Our highest point came much later in the flight when we hit 25,000 feet, but we did maintain altitude through the cooling period, which is normally the time when you see natural sinking going on. We didn't want to let the balloon come down at that point.
As I recall, you just touched on the ballast issue, and I wanted to discuss that briefly because your track, if I'm correct, changed and took a turn to the north from Nova Scotia up toward Newfoundland. And there was some excessive use of ballast at that point, and there was some concern, particularly, I think, Peter, on your part and Bert's. And I understand there was a conversation with flight control, again, to make the final go, no-go decision that there was concern over ballast. Was there a serious possibility of an abort at that point in time? How difficult was that ballast situation?
Bert, you want to take that, or you want me to take that?
I can take that. So we had left Cape Breton Island, and we were over the water. And as I recall, it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And the balloon was acting like it was going through a sunset. And at this point, we were communicating with Tomas Hora quite a bit. Tomas is a good friend of mine, and is one of the people that I mentioned before that we couldn't have done it without him. He was there to advise when we were tired and needed or down, and we needed a morale booster, or we needed his expert advice. He was adamant that we did not have any leaks in the balloon, and it was more due to the fact that we were so far north and the angle of the sun and so forth. And so once we got out over the water, we realized, because we were tracking more to the north, that we had, if we were going to land, we had an out in Newfoundland. However, we would be getting to Newfoundland in the early morning before sunrise. The winds in Newfoundland were 30 knots on the surface, even dragging in the water and coming up on shore. The conditions were rocky. So it didn't take much convincing that that would not be a good idea. We also were told by Don and Randy, the meteorologists, that our winds are going to pick up, our speeds are going to pick up. And so with that and the amount of ballast that we still had, we felt confident that we'd continue flying.
Okay. So, Alicia, you're out over the ocean, over the open ocean. One of the questions Mike and Deborah asked was, did any of you hear whale song while you were crossing Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and going out over to the open water? But so I'm interested in getting your response to that, or anyone else who did or did not hear whale song. But tell us a little bit about, I'm always curious, what's life on board like? I mean, how do you pass the time? I'm sure there are times when you're busy, but do you have time to sit back and relax and go, holy, look what I'm doing, and just let it all soak in? Are you busy working all the time? You've got to eat. What's it like being in a basket, especially with these two guys for a rather long period of time? But seriously, what's it like, life on board during the course of a flight like this?
So I mean, we were kept quite busy. So there wasn't a huge amount of downtime. We did manage to sort of get a few naps in, and after a sunset and the balloon had settled, we were able to get something to eat. But it was definitely a busier flight, and there wasn't a huge amount of sort of the downtime. But we kind of, if we were sort of partnered up to fly, we would sit and chat, and and if there was something going on, we kind of all chipped in, and everyone, in those trickier times, everyone was awake, and everyone was sort of, we were trying to work out the next steps to move forward.
We'll talk about some of those trickier times in just a moment. Fred, I think we can use that life on board picture that you've got now. There's Alicia, and I believe that's Peter. Any idea what you guys are up to at that point?
I believe
make a phone work. Trying to make a phone work.
Trying to phone home.
We're flying with Starlink on this flight, and everything is done on your cell phone. And I think I must have taken that photograph. But most likely, either there was a question with the cell phone, or they were together doing one of the many texts that we did during the flight, which was our main form of communications.
How did you divide responsibilities? Did you just work as pilot in command in shifts during the flight, where at one point, Bert, you were in charge of everything, and then Peter, and then Alicia, or whatever the order may have been? Or did you have distinct responsibilities that each of you were responsible for ongoing throughout the flight? How did you manage that?
So we were taking turns sleeping. The way the sleeping worked in this basket, we slept under the bunk. We had a little curtain going around the bunk to make it darker underneath the bunk. And as a general rule, there was always one person napping under the bunk. The other person was on the bunk resting, and the third person was flying. And we just sort of rotated that way throughout the whole flight. The person that was flying was also doing the communicating, especially when we were over Newfoundland and New Brunswick. Once we were over the ocean, not so much, but we continued to take turns throughout the whole flight like that.
We mentioned, Alicia, I think, mentioned trickier moments, and I forget which day it was, but it was somewhat early in the flight when you had a close brush with a rather large storm over the Atlantic, and I know had to deal with icing conditions, cold temperatures, et cetera, et cetera. Peter, what were those conditions like? You sent me a picture particularly of the ice on that clear plastic rain shield. I can't imagine that was a great deal of comfort in the middle of icing and snow. Tell us a little bit about the experience on board the balloon during that storm and as you were brushing it.
Yeah, we had been warned ahead of time that there would be some weather involved in the flight, and that was just a part of the whole weather system that was going to carry us across. We ended up getting more than was expected, and for a period of probably about 4 to 6 hours, it started out with a light snow and then heavy rain, and we were above the freezing level. So that rain very quickly turned to ice and started accumulating on the balloon. We estimate that we probably used about 300 pounds of sand to stay level, which means we had added about 300 pounds of ice onto the balloon. And the rain shield did not really keep us very dry. It probably kept, I'd say, maybe pick a number, 80% of the water off of us, and the other 20% got us pretty wet. It also, at one point, started creating St. Elmo's fire in the basket. We started getting electrical shocks from everything that was electrical, that was metal. We were touching in the basket, and that went on for about an hour. We never saw ball lightning, which we were very thankful for, because there was this big reservoir of hydrogen right above us, and that can get you a little nervous when you start seeing electrical shocks going on. So the combination of that, and that was Friday going into Friday evening, it eventually dissipated. We were still very wet through the night. The next morning, the sun came out and started melting the ice off, and that's the time when we shot up to 25,000 feet. And our choice there was to let the balloon go up or to start valving gas off. Since there was still ice somewhere on the balloon, we felt very uncomfortable about activating the valve in case it wouldn't close. A chunk of ice would get stuck in it. So we just let the balloon go up. When we got clearances progressively from oceanic control to get up as high as 25,000 feet. At 25,000 feet, they told us they didn't want us to go any higher. We actually overshot that by just a little bit, but came right back down again. They let us know that we were above 25,000 feet, but we corrected that pretty quickly. And as we were coming up to the English Channel, we wanted to maintain our altitude, because if we dropped too low, our meteorologists had told us that we would start heading northeast up the English Channel, out into the North Sea, and then up to Norway possibly. And we definitely didn't want to keep that one. So that was another reason we wanted to stay relatively high until we hit landfall in France. And from there on, things got much better. But there was a very tense period when the storm hit us, I think. I don't know if everybody else would agree with that one, Bert.
It was all in the forecast, and like Peter said, however, we were a little bit further north, and so we got closer to the storm than what Don and Randy thought we would get before we took off. And because of that, like Peter said, we encountered the snow, and then we came down through the clouds down to 6,000 feet, at which point it turned into rain and was raining extremely heavy on the balloon. Peter's correct. We did get wet. However, the rain curtain saved our lives, because had we not had the rain curtain, we would have been drenched, and then we would have been in freezing cold weather. We would have all had hypothermia. As it was, we all had a change of clothes that we got into. I didn't have any extra socks. Luckily, Alicia did. So the rest of the flight, I was wearing Alicia's girly socks on the rest of the flight.
Okay, well, we'll pretend no one heard that.
I'm not giving them back to you either.
So you like them?
Donna Wiedeker is watching on Facebook and has a very timely question. She's asking, who was PIC during that bad weather and snow and rain portion of the flight, or was it flight by committee?
Definitely flight by committee, I would say. We were all awake. Nobody was sleeping.
No one was sleeping. Yeah.
That was all hands on deck.
It was exhilarating. It's exactly what I was not hoping for, but I did not want this to be an easy flight. And this was the hardest flight I've ever done. And wow. I don't know how Peter feels about that. But that's exactly what I wanted. And for me, it was that part was exhilarating. The St. Elmo's fire, not so much. That was if I had to say my heart rate was up at any time during the flight, it was during the episode of the St. Elmo's fire.
Alicia, Donna asked another, what I think is very interesting flight. She mentions that she's studied your background a bit, but would love for you to give us a little background about your ballooning journey and with especially this flight, and how your dad's role in ballooning led up to your being on this flight.
Well, obviously Dad has done a lot of flying and has done a mix between the hot air and the gas ballooning. He's done sort of the Gordon Bennett's and the America's Challenge, and has done the Atlantic himself previously. He and Bert originally were doing the trip together, and then after the second failed, well, the first year they didn't manage to get a weather slot. The second year they had to land, and after that it was sort of decided that between his schedule and the other person that was going, Frederick Paulson, that they couldn't commit to another sort of year waiting for the weather. So the space was offered to me instead of him.
Was it always a case of growing up around your dad and his adventurous spirit and exploration that you would naturally fall into that kind of a lifestyle. Although I understand you work as a fashion consultant in London and have to be at work in a few hours. We apologize for that. Was it natural though for you to perhaps have some of that exploration and adventurous spirit in your nature because of your dad?
Yeah, I mean, we grew up around it, so I guess it was just sort of part of life. You know, he would go off and do all these different trips. And I guess as I was sort of coming into teenage years, he had started doing the ballooning. So I guess sort of in those years where you sort of find your hobbies and that kind of thing, that's sort of, you know, when he was doing the majority of his ballooning. So I guess, you know, we had, you know, he would launch off the lawn in front of the house, you know, to go off and, you know, get some extra hours in the hot air balloon. So, you know, it was just something that we sort of always grew up around. But he's definitely sort of been instrumental in all of my flying. You know, any of the sort of hot air sort of ballooning. You know, he will send me off to, you know, do the training with other people, but then you know, the actual sort of record stuff, you know, he's always there we, you know, discuss it all and come up with a plan, and he sort of helps with all of that side of things.
Awesome. As I say, I've had the fortune to work with your dad on a number of stories for the magazine about some of his flights, but never had the chance to meet, even in my frequent trips over to the UK, but hopefully someday we'll do that. Bert, this question I'll toss at you. This comes from Debbie Waltman, and she's asking, was it always your intent to maintain such a high altitude for so long, or had you thought the flight could be done at a lower altitude? And I think I read where you originally did think the flight could be made at much lower altitudes than this flight.
Yeah. The original plan was to climb 2,000 feet a day. The perfect scenario is you launch into this beautiful ridge of high pressure and you climb 2,000 feet a day to stay in the ridge. If you have this ideal scenario, then the balloon basically flies the way it wants to fly. It flies a little higher every single day. And you stay in this ridge. And so by the end of the flight, you'll be as high as 17 or 18,000 feet. But that's all in a good world. We never saw a weather system like that in all of the 3 years that I have been involved in these attempts. They've always started out nice and low, but at some point you have to sacrifice ballast, which cuts off a day. We figure on this flight, maybe we lost two days of duration because of the early altitude climbing and the early ballasting that we were doing when we were off of Cape Breton Island. And so flying at 25,000 feet, I don't think any of us thought we would be that high. But as it turned out, that's what we needed. And the balloon wanted to be there after the storm. The next morning, when the sun came out and shed the ice and the snow off of the balloon climbed at over 1,000 feet per minute. And wow. We quickly climbed up to, I believe, 18,000 feet and then got permission to go to 20. And then eventually got permission to go to 25,000. And of course, where the balloon wanted to be.
That requires oxygen on board, of course, as any flight at high altitude does. Mike Emick is asking how much oxygen was carried on board and how much did you use on the flight?
We carried 2 large bottles of oxygen and 3 smaller, 2 Kevlar and 1 smaller aluminum bottle. We had more oxygen than we possibly needed on the flight, even at the high altitudes that we were flying. We did have oxygen issues that we had to work through, but fortunately, all of that was thought through ahead of time. That's one of the advantages of 3 years on the project. You sit in the basket on a daily basis, going through all of your equipment, putting together the oxygen system and all of the possible scenarios that you may need when you're in the air. As it turned out, if we had not done that, we could have had a problem, meaning we would have had to have come down in altitude, which would have changed the profile of the flight.
Sure.
But as it was, we had extra regulators, extra hoses, flow meters, pulse units, all kinds of redundancy. And we dipped into a lot of that with the oxygen system.
We're going to have to move on so that we can stay within our time limitations here, but across the ocean, and finally you make landfall. And there was tremendous historic irony in landfall of this flight, because you crossed France over the area of the Normandy D-Day invasion beaches. Not just that, but it was on the anniversary of D-Day. It was on June 6th that you crossed over those beaches. I'd like to hear from each of you what that moment meant. One, because you knew at that point the flight was, assuming a safe landing, success, because you were now over land again. You had crossed the Atlantic. And two, because of where you were crossing and the significance of that date.
If I can jump in first, I want to tell an anecdote on myself here.
Okay.
I was doing communication as we came into land, and I got asked by air traffic control whether we were planning on landing right away. And I said, no, we were planning on continuing on, but I wasn't really firm in the way I said it. I actually was kind of choked up at that point. I was getting a little emotional about it. And the air traffic controller said, okay. And then about a minute later, he called back and said, are you guys okay? You sounded a little strange on the radio there. And I admitted that I had gotten a bit emotional. It was just not my normal self. And he accepted that and we flew on, but it was very emotional for me at that point from a personal standpoint. I don't know how everybody else felt about it, but it was enough so that the air traffic controller noticed it in my voice.
And I think, Fred, we have a beautiful shot of the balloon making landfall. Not that one, the one over the beach. This one comes in a few moments. Yeah. Well, that's over the city of Le Havre, I think we discussed earlier. We also have an earlier picture when the balloon was looking down. Oh, there we are, looking right down over the beach at the moment of landfall. Bert, Alicia, your thoughts on that moment?
Go ahead, Alicia.
I think we've been through so much in the last sort of 2, nearly 3 days by that point that, you know, it was just such a huge relief even to see land, and to be able to sort of cross over and sort of, you know, also, you know, the balloon was by that point flying really well. We had ballast, and, you know, we had the potential to kind of fly on and have options. And so, you know, I think a huge amount of relief, but also, I guess sort of the reality that, you know, actually we may have done this. Me and Bert kept saying to Peter, you know, we can't count our chickens quite yet. You know, we're not,
Yes.
you know, we're not quite,
now.
you know, we've got another night to get through yet.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to, you know, we didn't want to jinx it.
We didn't want to jinx it.
Yeah.
But so, you know, we had to get through that night, but it was a short night, and, you know, the reality sort of when we sort of saw that land definitely started to kick in, and, you know, it definitely was, I think, emotional for all of us.
Yeah. For me, it was the most emotional part of the whole flight. Not because of D-Day and the coincidence of all of that. That didn't hit until later that night. At that point, it was for me the years of wondering what it would be like, and then actually being there and experiencing it. And it hit me pretty hard. I think, I was sort of in the back corner of the basket, dealing with all of that myself. And while Peter and Alicia were up in the together on the other side of the basket. And so I was sort of where I wanted to be. It was the most emotional part of the whole flight.
So you crossed over the city of Le Havre. I think we have that picture. We had it up a moment ago, Fred. And we're deciding to fly. There we are, the balloon crossing over the city of Le Havre at late evening. Quite a bit of cloud covered. As I understand it, the winds on the surface were still quite strong, so there was really not a lot of thought of landing at that point. There's a beautiful moonlit shot a little bit later in the evening as you're flying on across France, actually flew past the landing site of Double Eagle 2. And I think one of the most beautiful pictures of this flight is our next one, which is that sunrise on the final morning. There we are. That's sunrise going into the final few hours of the flight. Amazing cloud cover at that point as you're beginning to look for a landing site. What were those final hours like, and how difficult was it finding a suitable landing site? Peter, maybe if you want to jump in on that one first.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to. And I'm going to make a comparison for doing a long flight like this in early June compared to October, when most of the America's challenges happen. The night is much shorter in June, so the night really went by fairly quickly. As we were flying, you could see ground through the clouds, and I have several photographs taken of small communities lit up at night that you could see through the clouds that were very ethereal, I would say. So we knew that we could see land. When we decided it was time to come down, Bert actually did the landing, and he said, "I'm going to take it down at 200 feet a minute because I want to not destabilize the gas in the balloon. I just want to come down at a very slow, very steady rate." When we came down through the clouds, what we could see was wide open green fields with strips of trees like they do in Europe as kind of windbreaks. The best thing I saw of any of that was fog in the low-lying valleys, because as everybody who's been to ground school knows, fog in the valleys means light winds. Mm-hmm. And we didn't need really any weather report to tell us that it was going to be a good landing. And Bert just did an admirable job of bringing it down. Steady rate, came up to one tree line, ballasted just a little bit to go over the tree line, dropped down in the next valley. As we're descending, the ground level of the valley is also descending. So for a while they're flying parallel to the ground, and finally put it down right there, and it was beautiful. A couple of fences between us and the road where we finally put it down, but that didn't turn out to be a problem. It was such light winds that we could actually walk the balloon to the fences, over the fences, and then very, very quickly, some local balloonists who have been tracking us were on site. I think that photograph was probably taken within 5 minutes after we were on the ground. So the landing was unbelievably perfect, considering that 24 hours previously we'd been going 93 miles an hour, and here we were going about 2 miles an hour.
Wow. We hear all the time in ballooning about landing being the most, there's a great shot of the three of you after landing. We have several pictures from the landing here. We always hear about landing being the most dangerous segment of a balloon flight. And I'm curious, after days in the air and the adrenaline has probably worn itself out, how difficult a process was that for the three of you to sort of get your wits about you again and pay attention and be alert and all the things that we all know you need to be when you're going to be landing a balloon?
I don't know about Bert, but I had some adrenaline pumping still at that point. I didn't feel drained until after I got on the ground. And Bert did a great job on the landing. I think there's a photograph I took of him from the back that we don't have, where just the concentration is so obvious. He's got his hand on the red line and he's looking at the sun and looking at his instruments and just bringing the balloon down. So Bert, I'll let you say what your feelings were at that point.
Well, if we back up a little bit, the last night in the air was the best night of the whole flight, as far as no tension, and all of us are in high spirits. Alicia and I think I had a cup of coffee. Alicia made a meal that we shared together. The plan was for me to get some sleep because I would be landing the balloon, and I got the best 2 hours sleep I had the whole flight on that night. And then when I got up, Peter and Alicia were resting, and I was able to go through the FlyMate app that Kubitschek supplied us. Worked incredibly well, and I was able to see exactly where we would be at sunrise off of that app, and zoom in and see exactly what kind of fields we would have. And I was able to go and go to a lot of local weather sites and see what wind conditions were on the ground. These are all advantages of going so late in my life, having Starlink and Wi-Fi and internet service the whole night or the whole flight. I was able to plan the landing well in advance, and I had gotten 2 hours of sleep, so I felt really good about the whole landing part of it. And Peter and Alicia got up. We spent an hour prepping for the landing, bringing all the equipment in, securing everything, bringing in the antennas and so forth. And then as soon as the sun started to come up in that photograph, that's when we started down.
We didn't have to bring in very many sandbags because there weren't very many sandbags.
But, an incredible night. Alicia, your thoughts on the last night?
Yeah, the last night was special. It was, I mean, it went quickly though, because we were sort of preparing to land as the sun was rising. So by the time we had, all sort of slept a little bit and eaten and things, it wasn't that long to wait before we were sort of preparing to come down. But that last night we also took the rain cover off, so it was fully open, and it gives a different vibe. And also you could look down and you see everything below you, and for instance, like as we were going through, we could see, well, we couldn't see them, but we could hear the fireworks displays and things from the celebrations. So it was just really great final evening.
It was a very short night, as this one is going to be for you, Alicia. Again, for those that didn't catch the first of the program, maybe it's moving well on toward 1:30 in the morning over in the UK, and Alicia has to be at work shortly after 6 tomorrow morning. So we'll wrap things up here in just the next few minutes. We have a number of pictures from the landing site, some very happy reunions. Alicia, your dad showed up to greet you. Joni was there for you, Bert, and Barbara for you, Peter. I guess let's go around the horn here. And what's the lasting memory that each of you will carry individually from this experience? And we'll go Bert first, and then Peter, and then Alicia, I guess, if we need an order.
I think for me, the lasting experience will for me on this flight is how incredibly coincidental so many things were throughout this whole flight. From the windy inflation that we had and the concerns that we may not lift off at all, to flying within 2 miles of a good friend of ours, Uli, that lives in Canada, who basically helped us the 2 years prior on our landings that we had. in Canada. And then moving on, coming out over the ocean and hearing the roar of the ocean the whole flight, to flying within 20 miles of where the Double Eagle landed after taking off from the same, not the same spot, but the same area that it launched at Presque Isle. So many coincidental moments for me and then for Joni to be there with the balloon still inflated when we landed. They were only half an hour from our being where we landed. Just incredible.
Peter?
Yeah, I have to follow up also a bit on the chase crew, because they spent about 10 hours driving down from Presque Isle, got on a plane at midnight out of Newark Airport, got to Paris at about 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, found a rental van, which I don't know how they did that, drove out of Paris, got about 3 hours of sleep, then hooked up with Anja Kummerlein and started heading for Luxembourg. So my overall impression of this is that it just went so quickly that it was, I think understand how Dorothy felt when she was heading to Oz, because on Monday morning, we were briefing with Don Day here in Albuquerque. By Wednesday night, we were planning on launch. By Sunday morning, less than 7 days later, we had already landed, and we were kind of back on the ground in a completely altered state, I'm going to say. Not only physically we're in a different location, but we just felt like different people. I do feel as if this event has made me more aware of life and the possibilities, and I think it's going to have a lasting impact on me going forward. And I don't mean from the publicity or point of view of being a celebrity. I just mean an awareness of miracles can happen, I guess. And I really feel like so many things worked right, and we worked through the things that didn't work right, that it was a miracle. So,
Alicia?
Yeah, I have to say, just to add on to that, I really feel like something was watching over us on that flight. There were so many, like, not coincidences, but, there were just so many things that just sort of lined up, or, just key sort of things that happened, that it just felt like, someone was kind of like looking out for us a lot of the time. And even just, that electrical storm, for instance, even a slight spark in that situation would have been disastrous. So, I think we, had a lot of luck as well, but yeah, it definitely felt like something was looking over us. And I just think, like, just generally the experience with both of them, the learning, and it's just a flight that will, for me, never be sort of replicated in the same way.
Bert, I'm going to give you the last few words. Sherry Edwards-White, we've got about a minute or so left. Sherry Edwards-White is asking, I think appropriately, do you have dreams and plans for more flights? What's next? Can anything top this?
I don't think anything can top what we just did for me. This was what I wanted to do, and the way it worked out. I did it with the people, as it turns out, that I would not change a thing. We got along well in the balloon. I think there's a bond there that we've all developed over this flight that we have. I don't feel that I need to go out and try to top this. It won't happen. This flight was incredible, and you could go out and try to do this and duplicate this, 10 or 15 times, and you won't get the results that we had. I'm convinced of that. you would not be able to duplicate what we experienced on this flight.
Awesome. Thank you all so very much. Alicia, particularly you, for staying up these late hours with us. Please give my best to your dad when you see him. Peter, Bert, my friends, always good to see you and chat with you. And I can tell you that in the comments, everyone has been offering their congratulations and saying thank you for sharing your flight. And we thank you for spending this time with us this evening and sharing your flight with the ballooning community. I don't know why I'm suddenly getting a little choked up just having the chance to talk with you guys. It's been a pleasure, and thank you all again for joining us tonight. With that,
can I just add one
Yes.
quick thing, Glenn?
Sure.
Another great thing about going as late as I did in this in my life is we had the opportunity to share it with so many people, and it blew me away to see the support that we got. And one author that wrote an article about our flight said it was the one good thing that we could all wrap ourselves around while we were in the air and felt like something good was happening. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to give everyone that experience. And I appreciate all of the support and the comments that people have given us. And it's just it's blown me away.
Well, you indeed brought a lot of joy and pride to the ballooning community worldwide, and we all thank you for that. Folks, that's going to wrap it up for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed this visit with these three incredible balloonists, Bert Padelt, Peter Cuneo, and Alicia Hempelman-Adams. And our dear thanks to them again for joining us. We'll be back next month with another edition of Inside the BFA. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and good night, everybody.
Thank you for viewing this episode of Inside the BFA. Membership in the Balloon Federation of America is your entry into the sport of ballooning, whether you're a pilot, crew, or an enthusiast. Everyone is welcome inside the BFA. For more information, see our website at www.bfa.net.